Today I'm going to tell you the folk etymology of the expression cold enough to freeze the balls off a brass monkey. Now the story goes that back in the golden age of sail, when you had big wooden sailing ships, you would have a pyramid of cannonballs up on deck between the guns. But of course, as the ship was rolling from side to side, you'd need some way of keeping that secure. So you'd put them on a brass plate with little dimples in it, and that was called a brass monkey. And when it got cold, because it was made of brass, the brass would shrink faster than the iron in the balls would shrink, and so eventually the balls would fall off the brass monkey and roll around the deck. So of course it was cold enough to freeze the balls off a brass monkey. Oh my gosh, I hate this one so much because it's so much freaking nonsense. I just want to rip off my own arm and beat myself to death with it. See, I first heard about this before the age of social media. I heard about this on email, one of those email chain letters that you used to get where you'd have to scroll down past everybody's email address and everybody's little comment along the way going, wow, I never knew that. That's so fascinating. Before you got to the nonsense of a story telling you something that someone's just made up and is not true at all. But since then, I see it everywhere. I see it in Twitter. I see it on YouTube. I see it on TikTok. I see it in books that purportedly are supposed to be written by experts to tell you about word origins and the origins of phrases. So I'm going to tell you why it's complete and utter nonsense. Number one, I've never heard of one. Now you may think that's quite arrogant, but I study naval history and I've read at least 200 books, primary sources, secondary sources on naval history in the great age of sail, and I have never heard of anything called a brass monkey. The closest I've come is there is a gun or a cannon called a monkey that was sometimes made of brass, but it was never referred to as a brass monkey. There was nothing brass that you would put cannonballs on, and you would not pile cannonballs up into a pyramid. That's something you might do on shore, but on the sea, it's incredibly impractical because I sailed across the Atlantic on a tall ship, and we were rolling massively every single day. And the thing with a spherical pile is that once you get above 30 degrees of tilt, those things are going to be falling off regardless of the temperature. Now, as I sailed across the Atlantic, every 12 seconds, we'd be rolling beyond 30 degrees to either side. We had something we called the angle of dangleometer, and that was basically a needle that would track how far you were leaning. And there was a stopper at 42 degrees. And several times a day, we would hit the stopper and then keep going. So we'd go to at least 45, maybe even 47 degrees. So in the great age of sail, you would not make a pyramid of balls because they'd be rolling around anywhere, regardless. Number two, I have heard of things called shot garlands, shot racks, and shot lockers because that's where they would have kept their cannonballs. The shot locker was a great big box that was normally built into the side of the hull down in the hold, and that would store the majority of the shot because you wouldn't have had it up on deck. They're iron. You wouldn't want them to be exposed to the elements. You wouldn't want them to rust. So you'd keep them below deck. You would have some ready shot by the guns, but these were stored in things that here in Britain we call shot garlands, and in America they're called shot racks. These would be parallel beams of wood with the balls in between, or there would be a plank of wood with holes drilled in them and the balls placed in them so they don't roll around. And of course, what are they made of on a ship that is 95% made of wood? They were made of wood. You wouldn't use brass for something that could just as easily be made, repaired, fixed out of wood. And the coefficient of expansion between brass and iron is close enough that if you were to drop the temperature 100 degrees centigrade, the dimples on that brass would shrink 1 millimeter relative to the balls, nowhere near enough to make any difference. Now, of course, the coldest temperature ever recorded on Earth was about minus 89 degrees in Antarctica. So if you're going down to a point that the dimples actually shrink enough to move the balls, and we're close to 0 degrees Kelvin here, the balls rolling around the deck are the least of your problems. So where did the expression actually come from? The truth is, we don't actually know, and that is a problem in the modern world, because in this day and age, we want to know the answer to everything, and we want to have a nice story, we want everything wrapped up with a neat little bow on it, and we don't like uncertainty. So there is another story that's grown up, which says it refers to the 3 brass monkeys that came out of China, that see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. It's a very good theory. Unfortunately, the origin of the expression goes back to before those things were imported. It comes from pretty much the 1800s, and it didn't actually originally refer to cold temperatures. It referred to warm temperatures. It's hot enough to burn the ears of a brass monkey. It's hot enough to burn the tail of a brass monkey. It's hot enough to burn the whiskers of a brass monkey. And then it was changed to cold, and to include the cold as well. So it was cold enough to freeze the ears or the nose or the whiskers or the tail off of a brass monkey. It was actually only in the 20th century, a long, long time after we stopped using cannonballs, that the expression became cold enough to freeze the balls of a brass monkey. Why did we choose the word balls? Well, obviously it refers to a part of the male anatomy and it's humorous. So while the other references have fallen by the wayside, this is the one that has remained, and this is the one that we still talk about because it's kind of funny. What brass monkey was it originally referring to? Who knows? It wasn't the 3 brass monkeys that came from there. There may have been brass monkeys prior to that. And so it has nothing to do with the Navy. It has nothing to do with cannonballs. And I just want to say that again because I absolutely hate this one. I hate seeing it popping up in my feed, and I hate the misinformation being spread around about naval history, about something that is such complete and utter nonsense. So, that is the folk etymology of the origin of the expression, cold enough to freeze the balls off a brass monkey. Let's never speak of this again.